Hello, everybody. Welcome to Clay Stories, our third installment. Thank you all for coming. Clay Stories was my dear friend Owen Deering's idea in Milwaukee. A bunch of us had just finished dinner, and just like we all do, whether we're sitting around the bar or sitting around the fireplace or sitting around the dinner table, when potters get together, stories are inevitable. And then when we were walking back to the hotel afterwards, Owen turned to me and he said, this should be part of NSECA, just getting up and telling stories. Let's do something. Let's make some kind of a proposal, which we did, and be careful what you wish for, because now this is our third installment of Clay Stories. So we owe it to my friend Owen. I'm Stephen Branfman. My co-host, Lee Birmingham. We've got a full slate of storytellers, including an open mic segment. So as you're listening to these amazing stories that are going to crack you up, they're going to make you cry, they're going to make you think, they're provocative, they're everything. Think of something that maybe you have tucked away in your storytelling mind, and the open mic segment is for you.
Amen. I was asked if I had any stories. I've been teaching in school for 37 plus years and playing with clay since 1968. If I haven't got any stories to tell, I need to find a different day job.
And the only ground rule here, 2 ground rules. These are stories that have something to do with clay, and they are 5 minutes long. And not 5 minutes and 10 seconds or 5 minutes and 15 seconds, but I've been impressing on our storytellers by email after email to practice, and time it. 5 minutes, okay? Our first storyteller is John Gill. John and I have been friends for a long time. He was a mentor to my son. I've heard John tell story after story after story, so when I was coming up with this year's roster of storytellers, John was one of the first people that I thought of. I asked him for a synopsis of his story, and he didn't give me one. And I asked him earlier today if he knew what he was going to be telling a story about. He said, I'm not quite sure yet. And I asked him outside, and he still was like on the fence of what he was going to tell his story about. So, John, do you know now what you're going to tell a story about?
Yeah, I'll do okay, Steve. Don't worry about it. Hi. I went to a little art school in Seattle called Cornish, and it only had 50 students in it. And it was the best art school in the world. It was 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, only art. And I had a job washing dishes at a local restaurant, and I got a really great job at Ivor's Salmon House underneath the big bridge. And there was this wonderful guy who was a chef there, who was out there in the middle cooking every night. He was just this wonderful, lanky guy. He was like tall, skinny. And his name was Hugh Matt Dillon. And Hugh Matt Dillon, when he got his uniform, the cuffs were too long on him. And he was this wonderful person, just really playful. Well, Hugh was my roommate, and we lived out on Aurora, and he basically was from California. He was a resident of California. He had done life on the installment plan at a prison called San Quentin for writing rubber checks. It was really great. The one thing that Hugh loved to do best of all was to gamble. And so one day, I was about 19 years old, he says, let's take the bus out to Long Acres and let's do the horse races. And he says, you gotta figure out what this is about. This is really great. And so we get on the bus at, 8th and Stewart in Seattle, and he said, now I want you to pay attention to everything you see. And so I'm watching everything. Oh, there's a pigeon. Okay, there's a crack. Oh, somebody spit their bubble gum. I mean, that's Seattle. They have that whole big bubble gum wall. It's just outrageous. It's kind of like, I was paying attention to everything. It's like, there was a walnut over there. So it's like, so we go to Long Acres, and I'm like, I've just paid attention to everything. It's really great. And so I'm going there, and I'm going down looking at the jockeys. They're just these little guys. They're not very tall. And they put them on the horses, and they want them to ride these horses. So it's like really kind of. So there, I'm like, and I'm running down, I'm looking at the horse rosters, and there's who's running by Bubblegum Cracky. So I put $2 on Bubblegum Cracky, and it's just really great. I get 2 hot dogs out of that and a Coca-Cola. And then it's like, the next one, Walter Pigeon is running, and I put $2 on Walter Pigeon, and it's just really, really great. It was really great. So anyhow, that's about Hugh. Let me tell you about another guy from California. I decided to take a workshop at Anderson Ranch, okay? And so I'm not usually the teacher there. And I said, I got to take a workshop there. And there's this little guy with a beard, and he's about this tall. He has really little hands. His name's Kenny Price. So, see, he had a little teeny paws. There's a really great picture of Ken Price and me, and it's like, he has real little hands. So anyhow, he's doing this cup demo, and this cup demo is really, so what he does is, can you hold this for a minute? This cup demo is really kind of strange. He makes a little patty of clay. He slaps it down really great, gets the nice corners really great around the side, really beautiful, and he's doing this all on Baltic birch. So the thing peels up really nice. Then he rolls out another little coil, makes another little slab that's a little bit longer, and he puts this little cylinder on top of this slab. It's really kind of great. Then he wapulates up the whole corners of these things. It's really great. And he pushes these things here really, really great together. And then what he does is he cuts these things and makes them go into this wonderful little dome. It's just unbelievable what these little paws are doing. It's just, I just love it. And so I'm just like watching this thing. It's really great. And the next thing he does, let's put another cylinder on. So he's doing that Vocus thing where Vocus used to make that big pot and put that little cylinder, and you'd always want to watch the thing collapse on Vocus, and it never did. Well, Kenny Price is making this little cup. It's like really great. And it's like, the whole thing's cogigulating in this really wonderful way. And it's like unbelievable, but it's just totally cogigulating. And I just really love it. He popping this thing out here. And watching him make this cup was a little bit like washing a baby, You never knew where it was, It was really kind of great. I really, truly loved it. And so all of a sudden he puts this really great, wonderful, copulating slug handle all over this thing. It's like really great. So I'm watching this and it says, holy shit, this guy's just made a normal cup. A normal cup, he says. So I asked him, what does this thing mean? Is there any meaning in the form? Well, Kenny Price is like Tar Baby. He says nothing. Nothing. He won't tell me a damn thing. I go in the other room and say, oh my goodness. Did I offend you by asking what this stuff was? He says nothing. He just says nothing. It's just really, I felt like Brer Rabbit. I couldn't get this guy to talk to me for the life of me. It was just outrageous. And he says, then what he did is he Reiki's my house. He goes to my yard and he Reiki's it. And he says, there's a white tree in your front yard. How does he know this? I was just totally shocked. There is a white tree in my yard. What type of tree is it? Oh, maybe I'm not supposed to say what type of white tree it is. He says, the minute we give it a title, we have lost all of the poetry of the white tree. And it wasn't until I read Anna Karenina and Tolstoy talks about the lime trees in Russia. When's the last time you saw oranges growing in Russia? It just don't happen, It's really kind of great. But anyhow, this is probably my last minute. And so for Christmas, I get this package. And it's this really kind of, Miss Happy sent me these. And it came as and these are Kenny Price's glaze notebooks from 1958. And there's what's really great, what we're going to do with this is we're going to decipher what's going on. What's funny about it is there's a certain clue in this to Steve because there is a Shaner glaze in here that is a Shaner lead yellow raku glaze. And you would never think of Shaner using raku, but it's really great. But what I want to do with this thing here is, where did Kenny come from? He was only at Alfred for 1 year, and he came from this wonderful lady named Susan Peterson, who was the Betty Crocker of ceramics. I mean, she'd tell you how to do this demo, how to do this demo. It's really kind of great. And so, and then he went to Alfred to work with this guy by the name of Clarence Merritt, who got a Binns medal for making glazes. Most of the glazes that are out there in the factory are all Merritt's glazes, and and he worked with Stull, who did unity molecular formula, and and he never wrote a book. All of the people at Alfred have tried to rewrite the Merritt book without any notes from Merritt. And so this is this really kind of great thing. So I have to be very careful on how to do this. So we're going to there might be another lecture here at NCECA. Huh? No. This is not mine to publish. I don't have the rights, but we will probably do a lecture on it later on. And so, hey, Steve, I hope I did okay. Bye.
He saw the bouncers coming out. So the next speaker, not the next speaker, the next storyteller. We have the man with the golden voice that ought to be on radio full time, but he's a potter instead. And without much further ado, Mr. Greg Lindley.
Thank you, Lee. See what they mean? Do I need this? Not really, but I'll use it. Okay, I'm here to tell you today, like what Paul Harvey said, the rest of the story. It concerns another click, the 2005 Potters Council workshop that I put on in Mendocino. I was president of the Potters Council at the time, and I heard from all the people who I asked, what do you want the Potters Council to do for you? And what I heard most was, we want to learn. We want hands-on. That's what we want. So I said, okay, I hear that loud and clear. So I established 10 workshops around the country per year, along with the staff of the Potters Council. The first one was in La Crosse, Wisconsin with Karen Terpstra, and that was about firing practices. We fired her wood kiln. Mel came out and did a demonstration on ITC and electric kilns, and we all had a great time. I still have a bit of a hangover from that weekend. And so I decided to do the second Potters Council workshop, and it was all about throwing. And it was in a beautiful location on the coast of California in Mendocino, 100 yards from the center itself was this view of the ocean. And putting on a Potters Council workshop is a lot of work, because we had 110 people come to this workshop. And as hosts, I had to find the location, which I did. We rented an art center for a weekend. You have to figure out the food. You have to make arrangements for a lot of different things. Fortunately, the Potters Council staff was fabulous, absolutely fabulous. They came and did the registration. They did the legwork. They did the groundwork. I had to do the planning. Well, along with planning, if you're the host of a Potters Council workshop, you get to pick what the thing is about. I wanted it to be about throwing, so I invited the best throwers that I knew of that I wanted to learn from. Steve Brampman, Mel came, David Henley, and Karen Terpstra came, and she was the anti-potter because she didn't really do throwing, not very well. I invited John Pacini to talk about clay, and he's the clay master at Laguna down in City of Industry, and he said, what? I only had 15 minutes to talk about clay. No, I don't want to do that. That's silly. I said, no, John, trust me. Just come anyway. You'll have fun. So he came, and I was right. After each session, and we had the same session over the course of the 3 days we were there, I had to go rescue him because everybody was lined up with questions for more than 2 hours after his segment was over. Well, I also got to pick the entertainment because we had to have some entertainment. And I'm a sucker for fiddle music. I played violin when I was in elementary school and junior high. And so I arranged for two of my proteges, and I put on fiddle contests to come and play. It was Darren and his sister Laura Smith. And Laura was 12 and Darren was 8. When I told the Potters Council people about this, they thought I had lost my mind. What? this can't be any good. Well, you're hearing them right now. If you could raise the music just a little bit, this is them. She's now in a major art school for music. And during the presentation on a Saturday night, one of the people who was attending the workshop, the son came. And he said, well, can I come and sit in? I said, well, your father's registered, so okay, I have a heart of gold, it's all right. So we get going, and we play a tune or two, and, well, he's leaning on the piano making leering comments and nasty things. So I'm going, no, this is going to work. So I took him outside. I got Mel to go with me, my muscle. And I said, no, this is not cool. You don't do this anymore. He says, okay, I'm sorry. So, okay, big-hearted Greg. Walk back in. Well, it didn't take long. He started it up again. So, okay, take him outside. And this time I got Mel and David and 3 other guys. And I said, you got to leave right now. He says, no, I'm not going to go. Yeah, you got to leave. So I said, Mel, get ready to call 911. You got to go. No. Well, apparently this fellow's been a pain in the arse to his dad for a long, long time. It's really uncontrollable. He was in his mid-20s. And so we sat there arguing, and finally I said, Mel, make the call. And he said, well, all right, I'm out of here. Huff, 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 huff. Off he goes in his vet. We don't see him again. I get a call from his dad about a month later and says, you know what? He went off, he took his vet, he raced down the street, he put it up a tree pole, straight up like this. Cops came and took him away, and after that, he decided that was it. Because of this, he's not drinking anymore. He reformed himself, and now he's still not drinking as a result of that night. So those of you who were there and saw that incident, you now know the rest of the story.
Awesome.
Right on time.
Those of you that know me know that in addition to being a passionate clay person, I'm a passionate cyclist. So I was out one day on a ride, and I'm riding myself, which is rare, but I was out on a ride, and I came up to a stop sign, and somebody came up behind me, and we looked at each other, and we said hello, and we started to ride, and after about 6 or 7 pedal strokes, I turned to the guy who was next to me, and I said, my name is Steve, what's yours? He says, my name is John. So we're cycling along a little bit longer, and I said, what do you do? He said, I'm a teacher. I said, well, what do you know? I'm a teacher too. We ride along a little bit more, and then I turned to him and I said, well, what do you teach? I said, well, where do you teach? He said, I teach at the Noble and Greeno School. I said, wow, I teach in a private school too. I teach at Thayer Academy. And we were riding a little bit longer, and I said, I was almost afraid to ask the next question. I said, well, what do you teach? He said, I teach pottery. I said, I teach pottery too. And of course, we've got helmets on and glasses, and it's summer, and you don't recognize anybody. And then he turns to me and he says, wait, you're Stephen Branfman, aren't you? I said, yeah. He said, I've always wanted to meet you. I knew that you live in the area. I've been using your Raku book to teach Raku to my students for years. We've been friends ever since. John Dorsey. Just the green button.
Yeah. This story takes place in the spring of 2005. And most of it takes place on a Thursday. Thursday during that spring, Thursdays were good days. My first class started at 10, so I had plenty of time to get ready. And Thursdays were really special because it was Makoto Day. Makoto Yabe taught in the Boston area for a long time, and he taught at Noble and Greeno School with me one day a week. He taught at the Harvard Ceramic Studios, at the DeCordova Museum, and at Radcliffe. Thursday, on this particular Thursday, Makoto has a long commute coming to school, so I worked really hard in the morning to get ready for him. It was the last week of classes, and we had decided a couple weeks earlier that we were going to do a raku firing. So I set up the kiln. I set up some chairs, a nice seating area, And it was, while it was a good day for me and a good spring, it was a really difficult spring for Makoto. He was diagnosed with stomach cancer in 2000, and so he'd been battling stomach cancer for 5 years. And that particular spring, it was a really big challenge for him. At that point, he was probably 100 pounds. His hands were really wrecked. He had white whiskers coming through his stubble. On that particular day, I had two great seniors who were really good throwers, and they were very fond of Makoto. And it being senior spring, they were basically able to stay with us the whole day. And they helped, the two of them helped Makoto and I teach 2 beginning classes and an intermediate class, do 3 firings of the kiln. We had great results. The weather was beautiful. Meredith and John ran to the cafeteria, brought us lunch, so we could stay and tend to the kiln, tend to the kids that came. It was it was an amazing day. Makoto died 5 days later on a Monday, and I remember because he was the only faculty member at school to have died while the school was running. And we spent, the art department spent the day, the following day, making little tags with Makoto's chop that all the faculty members could wear to awards night. About 2 weeks after that, I was putting the studio to bed. I was cleaning things up, closing it down for the summer, and I took the big reduction can that we had, and I did a thorough cleaning of it, and I discovered a small piece that hadn't been unloaded on that particular day, and pulled it out, and it was a small raku pig, about this big. Had a wonderful expression on its face. It made me think I was Charlotte looking at Wilbur. And it was Makoto's. He had done it as a demonstration a couple weeks before we had actually done the raku that we were going to do at the assignment for the kids was, we called it a raku zoo, and all the kids made animals that we fired. I knew it was Makoto's, and so I wrote a letter describing the day, the story that I just told you, and I wrote a letter to Makoto's wife, Alice, and I sent the letter and the pig along to her that summer. And Alice is a wonderful writer. She wrote a really gracious note back thanking me, and she just said in the note, when she opened up the package, she didn't need to read my letter. She knew it was Makoto. She knew the pig and the expression on his face, that it was him. And I never know how to end the story, but that's it. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you. Our next storyteller is an alumni storyteller. She was a storyteller at our first installment of this. And in my instructions, when I invited people to be our storytellers, I not only said 5 minutes, but I said you can show up to 3 photographs. 3 photographs. So send me your images so I can get them into the PowerPoint. Marilou sent me 25 photographs. Now, at first I thought that maybe this was a language barrier, but it wasn't the language barrier. So I emailed her back and I said, Marilou, 3 photographs. She wrote me back, I have to have them all. I have to have them all. I said, Marilou, I have to edit them down. We don't have time. She said, I promise. It'll be within 5 minutes. I've practiced. It'll be within 5 minutes. Well, she did let me edit it down a little bit, but That's Marilu. So Marilu, step right up. Green button, and just point there.
Hello, and thank you for coming. This is my second time. My first story, I made you cry with finding my grandmother's mug in Spain. I go to Spain every year for 3 months. I'm a ceramics pilgrim. If anyone wants to talk to me, I'm adding minutes now, about Spain and finding potters there, I'll be very happy to let you know. So, I started going to ceramic fairs. They have every year, they roam around and they have markets, pottery only. One side, the traditional alfareros, on the other side, the contemporary ceramic artists. We are the contemporary. The others have been for 9 generations. So I ask everybody, I want to meet everybody, and I want to go and see their studios, their factories, wherever they work. And I promise, I'm going. So finally, this year, I'm in Cordoba, and I'm looking at my map, and there's a place called La Rambla, and it's one of the most famous ceramic places in Spain. And I'm so close that I said, I'm going to go. I have a friend, El Lobo, and El Lobo told me, come to La Rambla and visit me. So I go there. I arrived to the town, and I asked to somebody, where does the El Lobo? He said, just ask anybody. They know me. Where does the Lobo lives? And everybody points me 2 blocks away, one to the right, and there's a big white house. So I go there. I knock the door, and a man comes. Nice, handsome man. And I said, I came here to meet El Lobo. I said, okay, come in. So I go in, he closes the door, and he goes out to a courtyard. So I'm there waiting, and I start looking around, and I said, there's a mistake. I'll show you. This is what El Lobo makes, very colorful pottery. So I look, and this is the people from La Rambla. They have been awarded prizes for traditionals. You see, it's all white. The tradition is they are unglazed pots, and okay, you see them there. They use them to keep the water. The houses are full of them. They don't put water in the fridge. The water is always fresh. And I look around and I say, this is the wrong place. I don't see anything colorful here. And I see all these big mounds of clay. And see, look at them. They're everywhere. And they're throwing. They have like 5 kick wheels, and they throw like. So I go out, because El Lobo never comes to say hello to me, and I looked at, these guys are working there. And what they are doing is they are collecting the clay from the floor, putting them on the wheelbarrows, coming inside the studio and dumping there. They had 3 huge mounds. So they dig the clay. You can see the clay in the back. They process it, and then they put them in this area till it's a nice, creamy place. And then it goes here. And they lift it from there. So I see them, they're working frantically, and it's like over 100 degrees. So I just wait to see if they can call El Lobo. And I say, where's your kiln? Can I visit your kiln? I said, yeah, the kiln is in that area. So they say, just walk around. So they keep going on and on and on. This is important, because that is their van. The van is ready to go to a fair, but they need to do all the clay preparation before. So I'm looking at them, and then the potter, see how they are emptying. So I start taking pictures of them. And they keep going out. But the potter in me just jumps there. In that moment, I saw an apron. They don't know me. We haven't said anything. I put the apron, and I said, okay, I'm going to start helping you. And in no time, I start helping, and they are bringing the clay now to this area. They throw kaolin on the floor, and then they start filling all this area. And there I am, Before they knew me, I was up to my elbows getting the clay out, and they laughed, and we became the best friends, and we emptied the hall. It was wheelbarrow after wheelbarrow, non-stop. So one of the guys was getting ready to leave. He cleaned himself, and I said, take me this picture because I will never forget this moment. So you can see, we are potters, no need for language, no need for anything. And look at them, they keep working. Here they are. And they're the most gorgeous people, they're the Lobos. So anybody wants to meet them, I'll be very happy to. They are wonderful. And that's my story. I didn't finish. One more. So they took me to El Lobo. The one I wanted is this one. He's the one I was going to meet. And they just opened the kiln, and he gave me one. No, that was it. That was the last one.
All right, we have the gallery owner, the entrepreneur, the film buff that's been a staple at the Telluride Film Festival for the last 27 years, just to name a few things. If you want to see a real treat, when you go to Denver, you go to the Plinth Gallery and you visit Jonathan.
Thank you. Thanks. So, you can start your timer now. Oh, wrong one. Green one, right? Okay, got it. So, I've been in the ceramic loading zone for a long time, a lot longer than the 15 minutes that are kind of allotted me in this, this photograph here. And my story tonight, has absolutely nothing to do with things you might think about. It's got to do with my perspective of 50 years as a ceramic artist, as an educator, as a mentor to some people, and as a designer and an artist. But I do need to preface it by saying that we're kind of living in a very dystopian culture right now, where truth masquerades as untruth, facts are non-facts. And you guys read C-File online? So one of the previous issues had an article by a woman who, the title of the article was Rehashing Modernism. And I'll just read it here. Is ceramics having its moment? Potters have been joking about their own reality show for years. Suddenly, ceramics is visible. This trend perhaps might be like many others: hipsters, fixed-gear bikes, reclaimed lumber furniture, craft beers, local, organic, sustainable, and jewelry found from discarded objects, made from discarded objects. Pottery might be shallow, and it might be a trend that quickly passes. Well, I started thinking about that alternative reality, and we all have our own alternative realities. So I want to share with you a little window into my dystopian and alternative reality. Volume. Submitted for your consideration. Potter's Follies. This is a textbook. This is what we all learn from. How do I know that? I wrote it. I should know. I'd like to introduce you to my doppelganger, Eddie E.P.K. Kalin. He's the man. So if we go to chapter 5 talks about the village potter. Do we need the village potter? Maybe. Do we need someone to make a vessel to preserve food, alcohol, unguents, whatever? Well, perhaps not in that cultural context, but I think we need village potters. And in effect, we're all kind of village potters to a certain degree. Well, along with the textbook, we also have a newspaper. Potter's Follies, or the Pottery Lottery. It's got headlines, it's got everything you want. And the headline that always cracks me up is Potter invents new mug, world peace at hand. Volume down, please. It's also got personals. So, Potter with benefits, seeking other Potter with benefits for mutual benefits at the wheel. It's also got letters to the pros. So it's, Dear Pottery Lottery Dude, I bought a box of clay. There were no instructions. What do I do? And by the way, is this clay gluten-free? There are real estate ads, there are interviews. The current interview is with this guy named Eddie Kalin, and he talks somewhere about his alternative reality. Well, there are lots of articles, and you can read it. It's probably available at the newsstand. But I'd like to go and quote Firesigns Theater when they go backwards into the future and forward into the past. So all of us in this room share in a experience that I like to call and I have to look this up because I'm always going to forget it. It is a remarkable endeavor, what we all do. We've had thousands of years of history, and there might be even a future for ceramics. But I have to tell you, every time I come to NCECA, and at the opening ceremony, we start with a moment of silence, and images come on the screen with those of our colleagues and friends who have passed into the ceramic hereafter. And I cry because I know them. And it kind of makes me very, very aware of my time. And I'm very conscious that, I'm conscious and aware that what we do, or what we all do, is limited to our time on this beautiful planet. So, what do we make with all of this? Well, for me, there's a bigger picture. And depending on our own level of ceramic achievement, and it's all different for everyone, it's a combination of luck, money, lack of money, opportunity, things like that. But we all share the same common goal. And I know that at some point, the pictures of many of us, including myself, might be projected at the opening ceremony of some NCECA conference in the future. But here's the takeaway for me. I know that without the help, the education, the teaching, the advising, the mentoring of the many, many people who were responsible for getting me a career or helping me along with 50 years in ceramics, I wouldn't have a career. I am absolutely grateful and humbled to be part of this continuum. If it were not for their wisdom, I would not have a career. And so, yeah, in 50 years of doing this, I've learned some things about ceramic art. And this is my undisputable testimonial. And I have to tell you, I'm still smiling. Thank you.
One of the things I discouraged our storytellers from doing is reading from extensive notes. You know, reminder here and there. If something needed to be read that was short, was fine. So I got an email back from Paul Lewing, panicked. I have to be able to read this. I have to be. I said, why? Why? You're good storyteller. You've done workshops. You don't read from notes. He said, well, I'm going to send you the synopsis of my story. So when you hear Paul's story, you'll know why I said, Paul, go ahead and read it.
Thank you. This is called Glaze Chemistry Nation. If you would flip that for me one more time. I'm trying to understand glazes. For 50 years, I've had phases where I've been obsessed, and I test it, but this chemistry stuff still amazes. I start with high expectations. It always ends in frustration. That's why I suspect I have such respect for the stars of Glaze Chemistry Nation. There's a book from which I've learned loads about fluxes and glaze mixing modes. For years, I've been liable to say it's the Bible, Clay and Glazes, by Daniel Rhodes. Some people are just great explainers. Look around at all your containers. Just check out the name. About half are the same. The classics are all David Shaner's. And Sika once had Robin Hopper. His speech was sure a showstopper. But his great book on color just makes me feel duller, especially that part about copper. Didn't know what molecular weight meant or how to do crazing abatement. So I got Parmalee, because he's smarter than me. Now there's a severe understatement. You can search in a glaze data bank whenever you're drawing a blank, but here's a disclaimer. It's in Hamer and Hamer. Get the book by Janet and Frank. For the price of what he had writ, I was begrudging John Britt. But after one look at his beautiful book, I didn't regret it a bit. My glazes all seem to need boron without piling 3134 on. I know I could save them if I could use glaze chem, and I would if I weren't such a moron. So I ran them all through Glaze Master. Every single one's a disaster. I learned a new trick to make glazes quick, but I threw them all out even faster. I feel like I'm going to expire. My blood pressure keeps getting higher. I'm filled with such wrath because I don't get the math, even though I got digital fire. My Shino just keeps getting riper, like something you'd find in a diaper. I'll call Richard Burkett. He'll fix it, I'll bet. Hell, all of his glazes are hyper. Then there's this guy, Pete Pinnell. He knows it all, you can tell. What he writes in Clay Times, unlike my silly rhymes, is all explained clearly and well. Over there's Professor Bill Carty. May he ever be healthy and hearty. If your knowledge is meager, he'll talk about Seeger and make all your glazes more arty. There's a guy who loves a good chart, if it's better explaining our art. Alfred Hughes Matthew Katz is a master of stats, and he loves them with all of his heart. I only had to read this so I don't forget one of these. An Australian guy, Ian Curry, has a method on which I'm still blurry. I tried it, I did. I made up a grid, and you don't make one of those in a hurry. Or if I need a new yellow, I call CM's Technophile fellow. He's brilliant, but humble. He's brilliant, but humble, with never a stumble. Dave Finkelberg from Pocatello. And then there's the legend, Ron Roy. His analyses bring us such joy. When I'm in despair, he's always right there. Such a clever Canadian boy. So, though I sound like I come from Nantucket, and I'm... No, I'm not going there. Though I sound like I come from Nantucket, this limerick talent's just luck it. It don't help a whit to predict what I'll get when I'm dipping a pot in a bucket. So to all of the guys that I mentioned, I'm sorry if I have caused tension. I apologize, guys. Can't help cracking wise. to thank you is my only intention. And I would like everybody, like Ron Roy, everybody that I mentioned in this book, to stand up and take a bow so we can thank them.
That was great. That was awesome. Everybody here who's ever made a proposal to NCECA knows how strict they are about deadlines, especially when it comes to the tech gurus to get your PowerPoint in on time. Well, 2 days before the PowerPoint was due, and it was almost completely finished, I got an email from Meredith Chernick saying that she had been trying to get a hold of me for a month. She finally was directed to me by NCECA. She's got a story to tell. I'm thinking, yeah, everybody's got a story to tell. I really don't want to redo this whole PowerPoint. So she sent me the synopsis of her story. When she sent it to me, Meredith, come up and tell your story.
Okay, so my story begins here in Portland, where I was conceived on accident in 1969. And I had a single birth mother. And in 1969, when you're single and going to have a baby, you go away to another place to have the baby in secrecy. So she left her home and her family and her job, and she went far away to Seattle to have me. So I was adopted in Seattle and raised by a wonderful family and lived a completely charmed life, and became an art teacher. My family quickly learned that I was the creative type. They were not creative types. Signed this kid up for art classes. I took art classes from the time I was 6 years old on, became an art teacher, became a potter, and life went on. And about 4 years ago, I was 44, and I thought, well, I've always wanted to know who I came from, where I came from, what my people are like, if they're like me, because I was always the black sheep of the family. So, the internet existed, and DNA tests were readily available, so I started my search, and it took a long time. It was hard to find. But I found my birth father, and he lives about 30 minutes from here in Portland. Connected with him, he's met my children. We have a relationship. He's introduced me to his other 3 children, and they are all artists. And my birth father is a teacher. So I don't think I mentioned, but I have no other teachers in my huge extended family. Huge family. No teachers. So I now have a teacher, and I have some artist siblings. 4 out of 4 of us are artists. So I kept doing my search, and I found my birth mother. And this is us in my hometown when we met. And when I met her at age 44, I found out that she's a teacher. She found out that I'm a teacher, so now I've got 2 teacher birth parents. But what was bigger to me was that I found out she's a potter. And she found out that I'm a potter. So it was pretty amazing, our first conversation on the telephone. She lives on the East Coast. We talked for over 4 hours, and we talked family stories, and we talked about how we got to where we did, our lives, our histories. We talked about cone and kiln temperatures. And it was amazing. It was amazing to hear her voice and to talk about clay. 2 things I never thought would happen. So I feel very lucky. And then at one of her visits, we had a little family reunion, and this is my mother, and she's telling my birth mother about my childhood and showing her my baby pictures. And that was an absolutely amazing experience. Some very brave women, very proud. And then there's more. That could just blow my mind right there, but there's more. We also found out through talking that we have some very close family friends in common. Remember, she's on the East Coast and we're in Seattle. And This is my family, my children, my husband, my mom, my sister, my birth mother, and her husband. And all the other people are very close family friends that I've grown up with. My parents have known them since their college days before I was born. I was actually their nanny. And then they are first cousins to my birth mother's husband, who she met about 10 years after I was born. So, really comes full circle. And just in closing, what I want to say is a quote that my grandmother had always said to me my entire life. Meredith, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. And I am the apple, and that is my tree. Thank you.
That was great. That was great.
Lewis? Okay, I got to tell you an interesting story about walking through a hotel room, a hotel ballroom that was off limits at Kansas City, 2000. It was a long time ago. Okay, and it was the first time, or the second time, NSECA was there. And I'm walking through this ballroom, and there is someone playing the piano. Classically trained pianist. Little do I realize, I am sneaking up on Lewis Katz, playing in the ballroom, and he is going to regale the crowd at NSECA out in the parking lot the next day with the flaming ceramic organ from hell. It was wonderful. He and I talked, and we've been good friends ever since. Meet Lewis Katz.
Okay, well, there's too many stories here, but, I keep thinking about this years and years and years, and as much as ceramics is a medium, I am convinced that really what we are is a community. And given that, next door, my first college ceramics teacher is getting an award from NSECA. I was in his first ceramics class, and he was my first college ceramics teacher. It's really cool. It's Kurt Weiser. He's next door. Yeah, there I am. That's kind of embarrassing. I wanted to talk. Hey, that's backwards. How do I make this go forwards? There it is. I wanted to talk about this ball mill. And it really is true. It's the people, and I miss Ken Ferguson a lot, and I was lucky enough to be present through this whole thing, so I'll tell you the whole story. I'm talking with Ken about something, and Victor walks by, and Ken says, Victor, I'm tired of paying so much for Gertzley borate. They're charging me 80 cents a pound. I need some cheap Gertzley borate. So Victor goes, go buy some. Victor goes, and he goes, he's looking, and the next day, it must be Wednesday or something, the next class day when they're both together, I happen to be there again, and Victor says, Ken, I found some Gertzley. I got some Gertzley. Ken says, how much is it? And Victor says, it's 15 cents a pound, Ken says, buy a ton. And so a couple of months go by, and whenever a truck pulls up, I'm there to help, Truck pulls up, and there's these 3 pallets. They're filled with burlap bags. They're just stacked up on top of each other loose. And the Gertzley borate is all kind of clumped together, but it's the size of split peas. So Ken goes out and buys this big ball mill and hires me and Tim Barry to ball mill the Gertzley borate. And in the end, it turned out cheaper. He paid us a lot of money to grind it up, and it was cheaper. And that was the story I was going to tell. It's really hard for me to say, what story you're going to tell. It's really got to do with experience, and what's happening. And I don't ever remember. This is the Gertzley borate. I wedged some into the clay. It blew up most of them, but those survived. Just so you know, it's got a water hydration, and you got to know about that. I didn't know about that. Chip Clausen has been using it to grind down broken bricks at the Archie Bray Foundation and use it as aggregate or whatever. He uses it for a lot of things. Here's some pieces in a cement wall he made. He's really great. So I know that was a really short story, so I learned from John Gill today, you can tell more than one story. I went to the night market. in Thailand. I'm a fluent Thai speaker. And I was buying a piece of man's cloth from this woman there, a man's cloth. She wove it herself. She, at the time, seemed really old, but I'm catching up on there now. She's kind of seeming young more and more each day. Oh, yeah, I remember her. But she talked like this, and I'm negotiating with her for the cloth, and she says, what are you going to do with that? And I said, I'm going to make a hat. She says, how do you do that? So I start to show her how to make the hat, and she says, how come you speak Thai so good? And I said, well, I'm smart. I don't know how to answer that question. So I said, that's my standard answer. I'm smart. She says, really? Can you eat Thai food? And I said, yeah, I can eat Thai food. This is all going on in Thai. She says, what about fish paste? Can you eat fish paste? I said, yeah, I can eat fish paste. She says, hot peppers? I said, yeah, I can eat hot peppers. She says, really? You want to get married? I'm taken aback. I'm sitting there. I'm like you. I can hardly, hold it in, I said, you see this ring? She says, yeah. I said, it means I'm married. She says, I don't care. I need a nice, rich foreigner who can eat my cooking and is smart,
It doesn't get any better than that, does it? A rich foreigner that can eat all that stuff and is smart. Well, we take a lot of things for granted. We don't have to use dinosaurs to mix the clay anymore. But Mel's going to tell us about some of the things that have made a whole sea change in the way we get to make pottery and do the things that we do. Modern inventions beyond mud mixers with dinosaurs. He's been here to see it all. Mel Jacobson.
You're all here for one reason. We are all together. We're all potters. We order clay. We order clays. We order materials. What does that come in from the store? A plastic bag. If we didn't have this plastic bag, no one would be at NSECA because you'd be home mixing clay by hand, dry to wet, and wedging it for 45 minutes. In 1958, the plastic bag hit the world. And clay producers said, we can put clay in this plastic bag and send it from Ohio to Hopkins, Minnesota, and I get a perfect blend. I open it up and give it to my kids, and they make things. 1958. And the plastic bag has kept pace with us so that we can have anything we want, ready-made, perfect every time. Some of you depend on it coming from this bag perfectly, and it has to be perfectly mixed in a pug mill. It has to be de-aired, and then, oh, is that ever nice to work with? But when I started, it was a pile of dry stuff in a bucket with a big stick, and I put it in there and rolled it around. And when I was learning at the University of Minnesota, we would dump out bags of clay in a room with shovels. We turned it over, and it was a lot of work. But you know what? We did learn what clay was all about. And so we have to give homage. We have to say, we are all here because of this plastic bag. And then what happened next? The plastic bucket. And on that plastic bucket was a sealable top. And our glazes went in that plastic bucket. And every one of you has 5-gallon pails of beautiful glazes stored for many years. So today, my pledge to you is that I still love plastic bags because I became a potter full-time because of this bag. Thank you very much. This is for sale, by the way, $4. This is one of the original ones.
He's kept it since when? Okay, I got to tell you a story because Paul mentioned a whole lot of glaze gurus that I always used to refer to in my classroom. And one of those was Dave Finkelberg. And, Paul's had the privilege of being in one of my classrooms. See you guys skipping out on the best party. We'll see you later. I'll catch up with you later. Okay, so I was doing a glaze workshop for my students at Box Elder High School. And Dave Finkelberg from Pocatello, Idaho, came down. It was a 3-day workshop. And I had sophomores through seniors. I had a student who said he hated math. He hated chemistry. He didn't understand it. Dave Finkelberg had that kid eaten out of his hand by the end of the 3 days. But the best part, that's not even the best part of the story. I've got all these students mixing up different glazes, and we had a test firing. We already had the pots made. We mixed up the glazes, and each student was responsible for a different glaze. We fired off the kiln. The next day, we are analyzing the way the glazes turned out and different characteristics, different thicknesses, where they were in the kiln, what reaction you got with the oxidation or reduction depending on where they were in relation to ship to the burners. And one of the students had mixed up Malcolm Davis Carbon Trap Chino, my favorite glaze. It's a magic glaze. It changes every time you fire it. Depends on how thick you put it on, where it is in the kiln, what you put with it, the pots that are sitting around it, all the good stuff. It's magic. It's magic. Well, Danny Glover, one of my students, was in charge of mixing up the Malcolm Davis Chino. We took the pots out of the kiln. The Malcolm Davis Chino was a nice, glossy, medium brown with dark spots. What went wrong? Oh, so we had to do some backtracking. We're playing detective, trying to figure out what had happened in this process. And we figured out the glaze table with the bins underneath. Danny had got dolomite instead of something else. The dolomite drawer had been left open. He'd scooped up dolomite, added that to the glaze instead of what was next to it that should have been the material added. Dave is on his cell phone talking to Malcolm. He says, "Malcolm, did you know that this is what your glaze does?" And Malcolm's saying, "Well, I've never tried that before. That's an interesting result." Talking back and forth, Dave, of course, Dave is talking to Malcolm on the phone in front of the whole class in this workshop. When it's all over, he turns to Danny and says, kind of stern, "Malcolm Davis knows your name." And just a story about the way that our glaze gurus have shared their wisdom, their knowledge, their experience, and sometimes we get a chance to share back. And it's usually a happy accident because we screwed up. But it's a good thing because happy accidents are a good thing occasionally. But I think of the the potters, the glaze gurus that I've had experience with. Ron, Paul coming to class, Lewis, the rest of you. As we have talked, we have shared, and it's magic. It's really magic. Thank you.
Before we bring on our final storyteller who's been invited, we've got some time for an open mic. So who's got a 5-minute story? Come on up.
Hi, I'm Ann Garrow-Stillwell from San Diego. I do craft sales. And I was thinking while people were telling stories of one particular incident where a woman stopped by my table and picked up a box I'd made and told me the story of her box. She said her husband had died 3 years earlier, and she was angry, which people often are when they're bereaved. She felt abandoned and annoyed and left. So she got a box, put his picture on it, and started writing down when she was angry at him about something, sticking it in the box. Gradually over the months, it shifted to writing what she was grateful for and sticking it in the box. And now, at the end of every year, she opens the box and takes out the notes and reads what she's grateful for and starts over another new series. And she put my box down and went away. Didn't buy a thing. But it gave me the thought that I think I go to craft sales to sell my pots. But it's really something better. I think we stand out there behind our stuff, available to whatever comes. It's kind of wonderful.
I thought I'd have to think a bit about this, but then the stories come flooding back. One 10-second story first was I did go to Denver, and when I travel, I do try to meet potters. And the first 10-second story is I went to Jonathan's studio, and the door was locked. I'm Steve Basile from Minneapolis. So, hello. Nice to meet you. Yes, I will. Yeah, I was VIP treatment. Anyhow, I'm actually not a maker. I'm a collector and advocate for studio potters. So if you guys are active in social media, you know who I am, either under my name, Steve Basile, or more recently, Curated Ceramics. And one of the things I've enjoyed doing in years past, I'm too busy to do it now, was hitting thrift stores. And one of the things you find out in the thrift store is basically there are time capsules, is you find out who was making 30, 40 years ago. And Mel, you're one of the great makers from 30, 40 years ago. Your work shows up, as does like Paul Morris and Chuck Halling, occasionally Warren McKenzie. Everyone knows Warren's pots, so those are very hard to find. And so I use, depending on what I find and want to identify from those decades past, I think about who I know and who might know made it. And so I was in a thrift in the South Metro of Minneapolis and picked up this sort of chunky, heavy student pot. And I thought, this is an interesting pot. I kind of picked it up, put it down, picked it up, put it down. You know, we've all made those silly purchase mistakes. And I said, you know what? This is interesting enough to possibly be a pro pot. And there's one aspect of it that's completely inexplicable, which is the top quarter of the pot looks like it came right out of a pond farm class. You know exactly what the neck and the rim of a Marguerite Wildenhain pot looks like. So, of course, I ended up taking the pot, and I sent it to Paul and Denise Morris, who are accomplished salt-fired stoneware makers in our area, and because it was a salt-fired stoneware pot. And she goes, oh, my God, Paul made that. And, of course, you know, I have dozens of pots that were made by various makers. And that's actually where the story gets particularly interesting, was Paul made that when he was a teenager. And Paul was in his 60s now. So I managed to find a pot that Paul made when he was an aspiring young potter in the, I'm trying to think of the neighborhood, Mel, on the west side of Minneapolis, by Lake Harriet. But he lived in a home and he had a wood-fired kiln in a garage. Yeah. Yeah, they don't do that anymore. So anyhow, Paul and Denise see me, active in advocacy all the time, and they invited me up to their home to actually give me a pot as a thanks. And so I traveled up to their home, and of course I included in the car this pot that Paul had made in the 70s. And so I had visited with them an hour or two. They have like a lot of rural Minnesota potters, property, dogs, goats, farm stuff. And just as about were to leave, and I had picked out a gift from them, I pulled Denise aside and I said, how much did Paul really like that pot? The pot of the 17-year-old self. He goes, actually, he was really kind of moved by it because, you don't often get to dialogue with yourself, sort of in a time shift across 40 years like that. And I said, how much does he like it? And she said, well, he's kind of really moved by it, quite frankly. And so I got the pot out of the car, and that's when Paul explained to me that summer when he was 17, he had done a workshop at Luther College in Iowa, which is run by Dean Schwartz, one of Marguerite's Pond Farm students. So that summer, he had learned how to throw a neck and a rim like Marguerite. So the bottom 3/4 of the pot was what any 17-year-old might do who is an aspiring potter, and the top quarter was Pond Farm. So he explained that to me. And but the coolest thing about it, aside from reuniting Paul with his 17-year-old self, was when I walked up to the car and I got the pot out and I handed it to him, his first remarks when he held it was, "Wow, I was good once." So that's it. Yeah.
Great story. We have time for one more open mic. Anybody?
Hi, I'm Carol Sewell, and I'm going to apologize in advance because I might cry. This is too fresh. It's from this weekend. I've met a lot of really, really awesome people, and as a new potter, I've only been doing this for about 16, 17 months, and as a new potter, you see all of this work that you guys have put out there, and it's amazing, and it's inspiring, and it's intimidating as hell. But then I made some friends, and one is going to be, we already call each other sister, and we only met yesterday. And I was going to be here at 5 o'clock this morning. I wanted to get this crystalline pot. Oh, I really wanted that mug. But she wasn't going to be here until 8, and she wanted to give me a ride. So I decided, well, friends more important than a pot. So I came, I rode in with her, and stepped out of line for a minute to get coffee. And I was talking to this lady in line, and I might cry about this group on Facebook called Clay Buddies. And another gentleman walks by and he says, I'm in that group. And I looked at his name tag and I said, oh, Zach, I recognize your name. I said, I'm Carol Sewell. And the lady, Sandy, that I was talking to went, oh. And I was like, over my name? What's that all about? Kind of thinking that to myself. And she says, you know what? I picked your mug to buy. But I didn't get in line because the line was too big. But I picked your mug. I was going to buy your mug. In the back of my mind, I'm thinking, no, I'm brand new. There's no way that you picked my mug out of all those mugs. She pulled out her phone and she showed me a picture of my mug. And I can't get over it. I can't stop getting these goosebumps that I had such a God moment. And that I'm coming away this weekend feeling so inspired, so encouraged, and like I belong. I am one of you.
I've been teaching high school ceramics for 41 years, and I've had a lot of outstanding students. And I've made a lot of friends of students and their families. And one of my former students graduated in 1992. He was one of the most outstanding students I ever had. And what separates kind of good students and excellent students from outstanding students is not only skill and ability and dedication, but a connection with the intellectual and academic and cultural and historical aspects of what we do. So Jeremy was that student. He was interviewed recently for our prep school annual magazine, and Jeremy did pottery with me at Thayer, went on to college and did pottery, and then became a surgeon. So he was being interviewed for this magazine article, this alumni magazine article, and the teacher who was doing the writing and interviewing him was talking to him, and he said, Jeremy, you know, you were so passionate about pottery in high school, and you did pottery in college. He said, why did you go on to be a doctor? And Jeremy looked at him and he said, well, becoming a potter was going to be too hard. Becoming a doctor is easy. So Dan looked at him and he said, what do you mean becoming a doctor is easy? You're a renowned burns surgeon at Mass General Hospital in Shriners. What do you mean becoming a doctor is easy? He said, to become a potter, to become a doctor, you go to college, you go to medical school, you do your residencies, you do your internships, and you become a doctor. He said, to become a potter, there's no path, there's no instructions, there's no manual, there's nobody telling you how to do it or what to do. He said, that would have been much too hard. So I chose the easier path. I became a doctor. That was Jeremy. And the whole idea of path and the paths that we forage for ourselves, the directions that we go, and the forks that arrive in the road, and everything that we do to get us here into these enviable positions of having lifestyles and not jobs, and waking up every morning and loving what we do and not living for the weekends. Our final storyteller epitomizes that. Robin Hopper hasn't been to an NCECA in about 6 years because of his medical and health conditions. And he was diagnosed with liver cancer a couple of years ago. And just like Robin, when the doctor said you have 6 months to live, he said, fuck you, I'm going to live longer than that. And 2 years later, he's still, I wouldn't say he's going strong now, but he's still alive. He's hanging on, he's still alive. And this is his second appearance at Clay Stories and his video. So let's watch and learn from Robin Hopper.
Yeehaw! Welcome to the Last Supper. My name's Robin Hopper. If you don't already know me, I've been around for a while. And I put this table together to bring some friends who I probably won't ever see again. These are some of my friends, or the remains of some of my friends. You be careful, you might get up here next year. On my right is Judas. He's a really neat and nasty character. Here is the Virgin Mary. They're all, actually she shouldn't be in there, should she? But we won't talk about it. These days things are quite variable. As you will probably know, I have a background in theater, so I like to play, and this is me playing. I did it always when I was doing workshops and having a very good time and keeping people amused. It's a celebration of the end of my particular lifespan and so on. I won't be around next year, so this is it, the Last Supper. We usually use a special instrument called a bugle to announce the goings on. And this is an American style army bugle. I used to be a bugle player when I was a kid, but don't worry, I've stuffed a handkerchief up inside so it's not too loud. Here we go. There we are, a combination of saints, sinners, ceramic artists, and the rest of you motherfuckers. I've been coming to NSEEKR for at least 40 years, and it's given me a lot of friendship and a lot of wonderful discussion times, and you know, I'm sorry to say goodbye, but this is the end of the line. Thank you very much.